Hello, all you wonderful listeners and subscribers to the Peak Prosperity channel. Listen, I have a big treat for you. If you want to know what's happening, why the banking system is in crisis and why that's going to be a perpetual crisis, you need to widen up a little bit and step back. Fortunately, I just recorded and presented a big, long piece to Berkeley's sustainability class. A lot of fun. I enjoy speaking with them every year. Smart kids. I'm going to share that same presentation with you here, and we're going to do it in 3 parts. So here in part 1, we're going to set the whole thing up. Part 2, we're going to talk about energy and the economy. And then in part 3, the environment and what we can do about all of this. So look out for those other parts. As always, leave your comments down below. I read them all. I just want to know what you think. This is my biggest, most important framing. If you get this, I think you understand, well, both what's going to happen in the future and why. It's both predictive and explanatory. So if you're curious at all about where this puck is going and you want to be able to skate there, you're going to want to watch this series. Thanks for listening, and let's dive right into it, and I'll be right back at the end of this. So I want to define what I consider to be the main challenge we have today, which is that we're on a very unsustainable course right now. And I want to talk about how we got there. And my orientation, again, is to pull everything together. I love this quote from Leonardo da Vinci, which is that we need to learn how to see. Everything connects to everything. So that's what I want to do here, is connect some dots, because they really need to be connected. And it's really important that we understand how these 3 things come together. So I connect the economy with energy, with the environment. I do a lot of focus on the economy because everything we want to do from a point of sustainability requires us to organize ourselves in complex fashions. Not complicated. Complicated, solvable. Computers can help us. Complex means we're in a system, by its very nature, is unpredictable. Complex systems defy our ability to really predict them. They have what are called emergent properties. They owe all of their order to the flow of energy through all of that. And of course, here we are, organisms living on the outer skin of this ball of planet called the Earth, and so our environment is very, very important. All 3 of these things come together. I don't believe it's possible for us to secure any one of these 3 things in isolation anymore, but unfortunately, all of our institutions, all of our power structures have been geared around making sure the economy, that's the child we love most in this story. If the economy needs help, we give the economy help. But as we squeeze on that economy balloon, of course, our environment suffers, or increasingly, we're going to have problems with energy. Now, all of this is contained in the video series that Lauren mentioned, but as well, it's in this book. It just came out, happened to make the bestseller list, so I'm very happy about that, because it means more people will hear this story, at least to debate it. Let's talk about it. Let's have a robust, full-throated debate on why I might or might not be wrong about these things. But I do believe that this framing I'm going to give you is predictive. And it's explanatory. So that's why I'm excited to share it here today with all of you people just starting your lives in this area, very important area, sustainability. So I have 2 shocking claims I'm going to make today. The first is that we live on a sphere and it has a finite volume and a finite surface area. It's finite. And the second thing is that infinite economic growth on a finite planet is not possible. It's also a really bad self-destructive idea, as I think we'll see very shortly. So before we dive in, I just want to separate very quickly between beliefs and opinions. Beliefs are a matter of the amygdala. Beliefs are guarded by emotions. You know you're in a belief-oriented conversation when emotions arise very quickly. Opinions are rooted in facts. We can have an opinion-based conversation. It can even get heated. It could go back and forth. We could disagree. But opinions can be changed. Beliefs are a lot more stubborn. They tend to be nature, for whatever, in her infinite wisdom, nature said, when you get a belief, humans, hold on to it, right? And so we do. And this is the cultural belief I really need to challenge, which is that we need economic growth. It's presented every time you open a newspaper, every time the Treasury Secretary or a bank official or anybody in an economic profession talks about the future. They talk about it as if growth was not only preordained as a manifest destiny of ours, but necessary. It's not actually, but I think as we'll see as we get closer, if I do a good job, it's actually a requirement, not of us, not of our Earth, not even of the economy. It's actually a requirement rooted in our money system, and that's where the trouble really begins, because every money system enforces some behaviors, punishes others. So I want to challenge this belief that growth is a given and that the future is going to look just like today, just bigger, right? So let's start here with really the topic that I've been asked to speak on, which is this idea of what is wealth. Now, this seems like it should be an easy conversation to have because we all know that the person with the most money is the wealthiest person. But this is not actually correct. It's not the right way to think about it because what we call money or currency is a human construct. I don't care which country it comes from. I don't care whose picture's on it or what kind of paper or plastic it's made out of. All money in the world shares a characteristic right now, which is that it's loaned into existence. It's a feature of the monetary system. It's just how modern banking works. But that's a very profound statement that our money is loaned into existence. And this would be a whole hour itself. I could show you all about how the banking system works. I could show you, how this all actually comes together. But this is actually the situation. So that's what we call wealth, but it's not actually wealth. Real wealth is, we're going to start with how the Schumacher Small is Beautiful Foundation people, they talked about wealth in terms of three levels. E.F. Schumacher did. He said, look, there's primary wealth, which is rich soils, rich ores, clean water, rich fisheries, seams of ores and coal and fossil fuels down in the ground. That's the primary wealth. And not all nations were bestowed equally, right? Costa Rica is bestowed with beautiful geography, which allows it to put up solar, wind, as well as hydropower. And they have a very different sort of primary wealth, if you will, geographically speaking, compared to, say, Germany, which is a lot flatter and darker and grayer. So primary wealth is really a matter of geography and natural blessings as your country was founded. And primary wealth becomes secondary wealth because humans will take the ore and turn it into steel, and the fish gets to market, and the rich soils become food in the store, and the trees become lumber, and so on. So secondary wealth is both the output of converting primary wealth into something useful to humans, and it's the means of production. Now, we have a transitive rule here. Without primary wealth, you can't have secondary wealth. If you don't have any trees, you can't have any lumber, right? So primary wealth begets secondary wealth. So those two things follow along. Tertiary wealth, this is a stock trading floor at UBS before it got closed down. But the idea is that tertiary wealth is what we've been told our whole lives is actually wealth. So this is currencies, physical paper currencies, stocks, bonds, derivatives, you name it. All these paper products, which are very fancy, consume a lot of human activity to manage, maintain, make them more and more complicated, if not complex in the case of derivatives. Whole other story there. But this is tertiary wealth. Now, transitive rule. Tertiary wealth only has value to us if we can spend it on some secondary wealth. I mean, what good would it be to have a lot of money in the bank, but you couldn't buy a house, you can't buy a car, you can't buy any food, you can't have any electricity show up? The wealth itself is not contained in the currency, in the marker, in the paper agreement. But tertiary wealth is very, very important because it's our social agreement. It's how we organize ourselves. Without having a well-functioning money system, we can't accomplish all these other things out there that we need to do if we're going to manage 8 billion people figuring out how to move into the future that we all see coming. So this transitive rule follows from A to B to C. Without primary wealth, there's no secondary wealth. Without secondary wealth, there's no tertiary wealth, right? So I just want to start reorganizing where we are in the wealth story because 200 years ago, in my town here, if you asked who's the wealthiest person in town, everybody points immediately to the person who owns the most land, because land is where the wealth came from. It either had the water power on it or it had the solar collection on it in the form of croplands or trees or whatever. But wealth was always understood to be this thing that flowed out of the natural world. And it's only with fossil fuels that we've been able to sort of forget that for 110 years now. And so that's been amazing. And it's also an anomalous era that I think is coming to an end. So you can think about it as a pyramid. The wealth pyramid says that it's impossible to have more tertiary wealth than secondary, and it's impossible to have more secondary wealth than primary. It's just how this whole thing is built. It's getting a little top heavy because, well, I'll show you what the data is around that. Now back up to the statement. All money is loaned into existence. It means that for every unit of currency out there in the system, there is an offsetting amount of debt in the system. Kind of a profound statement, because here's what we know about debts. They have both a principal component and an interest-bearing component, which is time-based. So it's my mortgage is at 3% per year or 4% per year, or now closer to 7% per year. I'm going to get interest on my bank account at 2% per annum. I'm going to be paying, X percent per month on my credit card. Interest per unit of time. The feature that flows from that is that there is always more debt than money in the system. It's just how it works. So right now in the United States, there's give or take around $20 trillion of money in the system, and there's about $92 trillion of debt. So that has, as I said, it enforces some, punishes some behavior. So the enforcing function of a debt-based money system is, man, when you're in debt, you work hard to make sure that you don't violate the terms of that debt, because if you do, people come after you. You lose your house, you lose your car, whatever. Things happen. So debt-based systems are great for getting people motivated. They also have a problem, a math problem built right into their core. So first up, money is what we're calling money. It's just a claim on wealth. I hold money today because I don't need to consume everything today. I store money up in a bank account because tomorrow I might need to buy a new car or put a kid through college or whatever the story is. But that money itself is not wealth. It's a claim on wealth. It's a claim on goods and services in the future. Not today, because I'm going to hold money as a store of wealth or a store of value for tomorrow. Well, then what's debt? What is debt? Well, debt's just a claim on future money. That's what it is. So when I have a 30-year mortgage, somebody's out there who holds that mortgage has made a claim on my monthly income for 30 years. For 360 months, they're going to have a claim on my future money flows. So that's what debt is. All right, well, if debt is a claim on future money, we should probably be very concerned with how much debt is out there, how fast is it growing, and what are we going to spend it all on, or what's it claiming? What does the future look like? So this is really a future-based conversation we're having here. Now, we just saw a couple days ago, that's Jerome Powell on the bottom, and Cynthia Loomis out of Wyoming was asking a question on monetary policy and the economy. Fairly dry question. She said, Jerome, chairman of the Federal Reserve, is our level of debt in the United States, is it sustainable? And he said, yeah, it is. She said, really? And he said, well, let me be more clear. He said, quote, the problem is that we're on a path where the debt is growing substantially faster than the economy. And that, by the definition in the long run, is unsustainable. Unsustainable? Well, this is the level of debt seen here from about 1900 on the left all the way through to 2020. And I put the last 3 years of debt accumulation in that last little red bar. The United States has about, federally speaking, just federal, $31.4 trillion, which Jerome said is sustainable, but not the path it's on. So it's a little bit of a parsing. When you decode it a little bit, it's totally not sustainable, because the path has been set in stone for over 5 decades. And so what he really should have said is how we've been conducting ourselves during the time everybody who's an adult has been alive. That way, that's not sustainable. So we know that. But what does that mean, right? And how do we think about it? So this is a chart from the U.S. Federal Reserve. On the top, these are the claims. That's total all-sector debt securities in the solid line. So that's all debt, just debt. Student debt, corporate debt, household debt, municipal, federal debt, just debt. Not liabilities. Liabilities would be the train tracks we haven't yet repaired that need repair, the Social Security fund that is not yet funded and we know it's underfunded, the pensions that haven't been set aside at the municipal level. Not liabilities, just debt. So this is what Jerome Powell is saying is not sustainable, because on top is the claims. Remember, this is debt, so that's a claim on the future money. The bottom dotted line is GDP, gross domestic product. That's the income in this story. You can just squint at that and see that the top line is growing at a different pace from the bottom line. At a household level, we would say our credit card debt is piling up by $50,000 a year, but our income is only growing by $10,000 a year. Sooner or later, that's what we call a math problem. So you don't need a fancy degree or any math to just see that if we just looked at this here in terms of the slopes of the line, so I drew an arrow across the GDP, just sort of tracking its rate of accumulation or growth. And then here's this first red line on the bottom shows you sort of the slope of that debt accumulation over the past 50 years, but the past 5 years, it's steepened considerably. And so all you need to know about why this is an unsustainable level of debt accumulation is because the slope of this line is less than the slope of these lines here. That's it. That's all the economics you actually need to understand, that we're on an unsustainable level of debt accumulation. The only way that makes sense is if you're using that debt to invest in things that are going to give you that sustainable, durable future. If we had spent in the last 5 years this kind of money here, that rate of accumulation of debt, if we had spent that on permaculture, installations and knowledge expansion, if we'd spent it on building soils out of our farmlands, of coming up with new ways of building houses, which we've known how to do since the 70s, right? R40 walls, R60 ceilings, put the glass on the south side, nice overhangs, right? If we'd been doing those things, I would have a different story than the one I am telling you, which is we fundamentally spent a lot of that debt accumulation on things that aren't here to help us meet the future challenges. It's been kind of frittered away. So eventually this story breaks. Either it breaks all on its own, or somebody comes along politically and says, we should do something about this. That's not going to happen, because that story, that let's do something about this politically, that's called austerity. Nobody likes it. You get voted out of office instantly when you tell people, time to start paying back the debts of the people who came before you, right? And you have to live way below your means so that we can pay that stuff back, right? It's never a politically popular story. So all things being equal, we're just going to keep piling up the debt until it becomes an actual problem. All right, that concludes part 1. As always, come by peakprosperity.com if you want to know what's going on in real time. I am your information scout. I spent a lot of time analyzing the world, studying what's going on, and putting it all together in a consumable, understandable package so you don't have to. Saves you time. And as well, you get to hang out with other people who are in your tribe. As always, come on by Peak Prosperity if you want the full picture. We are the #1 online resilience community. Thanks for listening. Bye.
The beauty of saying it's an emergency is very difficult to challenge any of this stuff.
Our wealth is being stolen via our money.
I would have never come here if I thought it was lost. I know we can